Here's chapter 10 of The Whistling Mountain by Mary Daem. By the time David and his mother reached the top of the trail, they were both so tired they had stopped talking. They had stopped exclaiming at the things to be seen and were just pushing one foot ahead of the other. The parcels they carried seemed to weigh a great deal more than they had when they had first begun to carry them. "Mother," David said very quietly as they sat down on the back steps before climbing them, "don't you wish there was a bus service here?" Mrs. Dunn put her parcels down beside her on the step. She was hot and tired and her feet hurt. "David, this is one time I certainly agree with you. And about now I wouldn't be surprised if your father is thinking the same as we are." David looked up and across the valley. His mountain looked very close in the clear, sun-filled air. It didn't seem possible that before he could get to even the bottom slopes, he would have to cross a river. Somewhere across that river, his father was clearing a trail with Barney and Big John, a trail that David was going to follow right up to the top, right to the slopes where the marmots lived. And David wasn't going to wait until he was much older either. Just as long as he stayed on the trail, he'd be all right. It was something he had to do. David chattered all through supper. He had a lot to tell his father, but he was careful to avoid telling him that he had been lost and had seen a bear and been close to the river. There was no use getting scolded. "How far up my mountain did you get today?" he asked eagerly. "Well, we repaired the bridge, and we got quite a distance. The trail's in fairly good shape. Not as many windfalls as we expected. There are 2 more men coming for the trail gang tomorrow, so we should make better progress. There will be climbers coming soon, and the trails have to be ready for them." "Do lots of people come to climb the mountains?" "Yes, David, they do. And lots of people come in here to hike and to take pictures of the flowers and the scenery. Soon it won't be quite so lonely, for there'll be more people about." "Did you get near the marmots, Dad?" "Well, no, but we certainly heard them whistling." "I was whistling today, too, with a willow whistle." "A willow whistle? I haven't seen one of those since I was a boy about your size. Where did you get that?" "From Eric. He's my age, Dad, and he goes to school in Swiftwater, too. We're going to be friends." "Well, I'm glad of that. I know it's a bit lonely up here for you. But right now I think it's about time you went to bed. You should be tired after the walking you've done." David certainly was tired. A great yawn stretched his face out of shape. Yet he went reluctantly into his bedroom. A boy missed so many things by sleeping. He stood at the window and looked at his mountain. It was very dark, but above it one bright star was twinkling. His mother brought a lamp into his bedroom, and a soft yellow light made fancy shadows in the corners and under the bed. David watched them move as he peeled off his sweater and hung it on a chair. He bent down to untie his shoelaces, and the shadows bent down too. David waved his hand. The shadow hand waved back. "In bed yet, son?" Mrs. Dunn called, coming back into the room to kiss him goodnight and to blow at the lamp. "You are slow. I thought you would have been in bed minutes ago." "Oh, making shadow pictures. I used to do that when I was a girl." David's mother stood where the light from the lamp would throw the blackest shadows and put her hands together. There on the wall was a shadow cat. Next, she folded her hands to make a swan, and then an eagle with a great curving beak. She moved her hands to show a dog's head and a fluttering butterfly. "Now try a marmot, Mother, a big fat one," David begged. "Hurry up and get into bed, and I'll try. I haven't done this for years." She moved her hands this way and that way, but none of the shadows looked the least bit like a marmot. "I'm sorry, son, but I can't make a marmot. You can try yourself tomorrow." She kissed him good night, and after she blew out the lamp, she took it back into the kitchen with her. David was glad to get under the covers. He was really tired, but it was a good tiredness. He shut his eyes, rubbed them, and opened them wide. Even without the lamplight, the room seemed very bright. He could still see the star above Whistling Mountain, and there was another star beside it. He lay and looked at his mountain. He thought about the things he'd learned since he left the city. There were the trees and the marmots that whistled on the rock-strewn slopes. He'd learned about squirrels and chipmunks and porcupines and blue jays. There were puffballs to think about and butterflies that looked like flowers flying. He had seen an eagle and, of course, the bears. His friends at the old school would never believe him if he wrote and told them that he had seen a wild bear go into the bushes. His eyes shut and he slept. His sleep was all mixed up with bears that whistled and chipmunks as big as horses. And they all said, "David, don't do this," and "David, don't do that." Before he knew it, someone was popping into his bedroom and saying, "David, don't sleep so long. Breakfast is all ready and we want you to come and help eat it." "You know, David," Mr. Dunn said as he drank the last of his morning coffee, "I've been thinking, if it is a nice day Sunday and no fires reported, I think we'll ask your mother to pack us a lunch, and the three of us will go up the trail on your mountain and see if we can get close enough so that you can see those marmots you are so interested in. We'll make it a real picnic. Do you think you'd like that?" David nearly dropped his spoon. "A picnic? I don't think I've ever been on a picnic before. Can we eat outside? And what if it rains?" "If it rains, we'll just have to wait until another time. And of course we'll eat outside. I'll make a campfire and we'll boil our water and make tea for your mother. We might even toast marshmallows if I can remember to get some at the store." "How do you toast a marshmallow?" That was only one of the many questions David asked. They came tumbling out like rocks down the mountainside, and Mr. Dunn patiently answered them until it was time for him to leave with Barney and Big John. "Now, David, listen to me carefully," he ordered. "We are taking our lunches out on the trail today. We don't want to be wasting time coming home at lunchtime. I want you to stay close to the cabin." And before David's horrified eyes, he drew from his pocket a handkerchief, stained and torn, with a large D embroidered in one corner. David's mouth dropped open and his face got red and hot. So his father had known all along about his having strayed off the trail, and he hadn't said a word. "See that the wood box is filled, and help your mother all you can. And about noon, the two men who are going to help us on the trail gang will be coming. I want you to show them the bunks in the storehouse. Tell them to make themselves at home until we get back." David pushed his hair back from his eyes. "I'll stay right near the cabin, and I'll show them in the bunkhouse like you said." His father put his hand on his shoulder and gave it a squeeze. "I know you will, son," he said quietly. David's mind was in a whirl. First, there was the picnic to think about. He was really going to go part way up his mountain, and there'd be a campfire like he'd read about but never seen. And maybe if they were lucky, they'd see the marmots, more than one of them. Sunday seemed so far away. He carried wood into the kitchen until the box wouldn't hold another stick. He dried the dishes, and he straightened his bed and hung up his clothes. He stood at the window and looked at his mountain, and he wondered just how far they would get on the picnic day. Oh, how he wished he could start that very minute. He could get to his mountain. He knew he could. And then he remembered that he'd promised to stay right by the cabin, and he remembered why. It was a punishment for going where he had been forbidden to go. It was wonderful of his father not to mention it in front of the others, but still, not to be allowed to go away from the cabin. And then he remembered the men who were coming, and he remembered that it was he, and not his mother, who was to take them down to the bunkhouse. He'd have to leave the cabin yard, and he felt very grown up and responsible all of a sudden. His father had trusted him after all. That's the end of chapter 10.